Now I'll tell you a little bit about my own personal saga of getting acquainted with basic space as the treasury of all phenomena. Basic space. Basic space could be called the peer view, and everything within it, and in other words, everything that can be labeled and described as a point of view. But if we take up any of those points of view as a reference point or a context, then we've adopted a superstitious belief. We've adopted a superstitious belief about who we take ourselves to be, who we take others to be, and what we take the world to be. So within this basic space of phenomena, the basic space of all points of view, absolutely everything that appears within it is the dynamic energy of that space. In other words, it's inseparable from that space. Just like the color blue is inseparable from the sky. There's no way we could separate out the color blue from the sky. That would be absolutely impossible. So all the phenomena or points of view within this peer view of basic space are the dynamic energy of that space and nothing else. They're inseparable from it. So when we have a perception of any kind of point of view, a reference point, all it is the dynamic energy of that space. When we identify ourselves as a someone who is viewing an object, then we have 2 points of reference going. We have 2 superstitious beliefs about what is going on. But when we just rest naturally as the essence of that space, when we allow the seeing of that space, as my friend Alan says, when we just allow seeing, allow awareness, then we realize that we've never been contained by any of these points of view, no matter what they are. And all of us know this. We know it unerringly. It's just that we've distracted ourselves with all the superstitions of conventional life, all the superstitions of the norm of what most people are taking themselves to be. But we do not have to take ourselves to be anything other than what we are. And it's entirely up to us to get acquainted with ourselves as we are. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own experience with that. And when I share my experience, I want you very much to relate it to your own experience. So look back through your life and recognize the times when you were very aware of what you really are, no matter what anyone else was saying. Well, first of all, when I was a child, like all children, I just felt timelessly free. There was nothing going on. People were trying to give me all these concepts that all I wanted to do was play and look at the mountains. And that was my idea of a good time, and twirl around and just enjoy being, just enjoy the ease of being. Well, see, this is our natural state, enjoying the ease of being. But all of these concepts were introduced to me, all these frames of reference, these superstitions. Now, I had a choice as to whether I adopted those superstitions or not. And some of them I did adopt, although I never really bought it. And no one ever does. No one ever does really buy it. So, when I got to be about 7 years old, I took myself to be Candice and an I and a me and a mine, and I'd adopted all these personal identity reference points. And I knew a little bit about thinking and such things. I'd started going to school. And when I went to school, all I really wanted to do was sit out on the hillside and watch the whales swim by. I'd always get in trouble because the bell would ring and I'd be halfway down the hill watching the whales. So I wasn't really fitting myself into any structure. I really had a hard time doing that. And this is true for all children. It's true for all children. It's very difficult for us to associate ourselves with anything other than what we are. And I lived in Bermuda, and along the back side of our property, there was a bay forest and a cedar forest. And I went to a Catholic school, Mount St. Agnes Academy. And there, I learned that to be a good Catholic, and I learned that all the clerics or the people who said the Mass were priests, and that I'd never be able to say the Mass because I wasn't a priest. So I thought, well, that doesn't really matter. I can say Mass anyway. I'll just go out in the woods here behind the house and I'll make an altar. So I made this big altar of twigs and sticks and all of these other things and cedar needles and bay leaves. It was very fragrant, a very, very beautiful place. So I put all these things together and I set up my own little church in the wood, and then I started to say my own version of the Mass. Well, while I was doing this, all of a sudden, it was like everything disappeared. There was just space. That's all there was. And I was so astounded. It was just like, wow, this is all there is. This is all there is. There's never been anything going on here. And then, I thought, oh, I'll tell Mommy and Daddy about this. But then I thought, no, I don't think I will. I mean, after all, they had just told me there was no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. How is this going to fly? That not only is there no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny, there's nothing. Here's another thing. Oh, my God. Not only to those points of reference. When they told me these things, I was devastated. I was sitting in my little sandbox playing. My mother came out and sat on one of the little seats and told me there was no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny. Oh, boy, that was just very difficult. So I knew this basic space wasn't going to go where everything just became indivisible. And so, I kept it to myself and I wandered on through life. And then when I was in 7th grade, we were given an assignment. And, I kind of forgot about basic space and indivisibility and that kind of thing. When I was in 7th grade, we were given an assignment in our science class. And our assignment was we were to write about why everything is moving. So we all came back to the class, and the answer was that the Earth rotates. So that was why everything was moving. But that wasn't the answer I came up with. The answer I came up with was that everything is made of molecules, and molecules are always moving. So that's why everything is moving. But really, these molecules, they aren't anything. They're just space. And that this idea of the moving and the space in which the moving occurs, that basic space, that they're not two. So the moving and the non-moving are not two. So then, I had that realization. And my teacher really liked that. He said, okay, you're really smart. We're going to put you in a gifted program. And he said, now, one of the things about being gifted is that means you have to help people. So he said, you're going to be a spelling tutor now. So you see, I was learning all these things. I was learning that there is this basic space and that when you're in touch with it, you know more about things. And then I also learned from my teacher that that meant that compassion was part of that benefit for the whole was part of that. So these were just little things I was learning along the way. These were all intellectual. They were understandings, insights, or speculations. I didn't have the full evidence of myself as that. I just had a pointer. I had a pointer of a reality that was beyond anything that could be described. Then when I was in my 20s, I had another amazing experience of that, where I had more of a sense of it being myself. And that was when I had an emergency appendectomy. I had an emergency appendectomy and I was under general anesthesia. But when I was under the general anesthesia, I was aware the entire time. And I wasn't aware as my body. I was aware as the space in which the body and everything else was going on. And I could hear everything going on. I could see everything going on, but I couldn't do anything about it. So I couldn't intervene. I couldn't say, hey, I know what's going on. I can hear everything you're saying. And what they were saying was amazing. They were telling jokes and just acting like they were baking a cake. So, they were very nonchalant about my body and cutting it open. So, then I realized that this space is aware. This basic space, it's aware. It's not a void or anything like that. So you see, these are direct human experiences. And if you look back on your life, every single one of you will remember these things about your own life. It's just that no one ever talks about them, so we don't become acquainted with them. We don't become acquainted with the reality that we are vast like infinite space, that our awareness is vast like infinite space, and that our body, it actually is dependent on that rather than awareness being dependent on a body. Do you see what I'm saying? So when we break all down to pure space, what we find is that there is no one there who was born, dwells, or will cease. That the reality of what Paulness is basic space and nothing else. Basic space and nothing else. And that anything that appears within that space is as that space is. And as that space is, it is beyond time and space, and it is beyond cause and effect. It includes cause and effect in time and space, but it's beyond cause and effect in time and space. Because when we examine cause and effect or time and space to find the causeness or the effectness or the timeness or the spaceness in any of those things, we find the same thing that we found out about Paul. Basic space and nothing else. No phenomena, no matter what it is, no point of view, no matter what it is, has an independent origin other than basic space. So any label, no matter what it is, has an independent origin other than basic space. And the only way that we can come into touch with that as who we are is to simply allow the ease of that. To allow the ease of the awareness that is the underlying basis of that space. So you may wonder how I then became fully aware that that is who I am, where all of the understanding and the direct experience came together. I reached a point 25 years ago where I was just bombarded with perceptions. All kinds of miserable thoughts and feelings I won't even go into. You'd be bored to death. And so would I. And all kinds of circumstances going on in my life, and I didn't know what to do about them. All my frames of reference, they didn't work. All the frames of reference I'd adopted, they just didn't work at all. And so I felt totally hopeless. Well, how am I going to live the rest of my life like this? This is completely miserable. I can't stand it, and I don't want to go on like this. And so in the throes of that complete desperation and bewilderment, I suddenly realized that all of these appearances that I had taken to be myself, thoughts, feelings, sensations, that they were this basic space. That's what they are. And that when I just rested as that, I just rested as the relief of that. I didn't even know what else to call it. Just spacious relief, complete relief, just allowing the relief that is always the case in every perception. And as I did that rigorously over a course of 10 days, it just became more and more obvious. And as it became more and more obvious, this compassion that my 7th grade teacher had told me about, it became more and more obvious at the same time. So without trying to cultivate or develop any kind of compassionate impulse, it just became more and more obvious. The more I allowed awareness to be as it is, the more I allowed the ease of basic space to be the reality of everything, the more it was clear that I'd never been anything other than that, and neither had anyone else.